Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is MongoDB monitoring and alerting with PMM. So we're going to look at a few things. Hopefully my clicker works. I have to turn it on first. There we go. Okay, now we're talking. So the idea of this talk is to look at PMM from the MongoDB perspective. Okay, I'm going to show you some of the new features that we have in that regard, and also cover the integrated alerting for those of you that are interested in that. There'll be some time for questions as well. My name is Ivan. I'm from Argentina, and you can see here there's a picture of me at the glaciers in the southern part of the country, which are pretty cool. If you ever go, definitely recommend it. So let's talk about the architecture of PMM first. As you know, there's a client and server, right? The PMM client runs on every host and then collects the metrics and query analytics data. And the PMM server, of course, is another part and receives the data from the clients, and then it will do some transformation, store the data, and then make it available for you via the web interface, okay? In terms of the architecture, we have our monitor systems, which again are interacting with the PMM client part, which then will ship data over to the server. And this is, you as an end user will interact through the command line with the client and via the web GUI with the server, okay? And also, if you've been to the keynote, you might have heard about the Percona platform, which is our new offering, which integrates with PMM to give you some additional information in the form of advisors and DB as a service functionality. The PMM client has a few components. First, we have the PMM agent, okay, which is the systemd service that will manage all the exporters and also the authentication with the PMM server. Then you have the PMM admin tool, which is the command line tool that you use to interact with the PMM agent. And then there's the exporters, where you have many of them, like most commonly for a MongoDB environment, you'll have the node exporter, which will report the operating system level metrics. And then, of course, the MongoDB exporter, which will connect to your MongoDB and get the metrics from that are specific to MongoDB. There's many others, okay, for the other database platforms, but we'll not be talking about those now, okay? So for the server, we have, as you know, it's built on Victoria Metrics, which has actually a stand in the conference if you want to stop by and check out more about it. It's a time series DB, right, where we store the metrics. And then we have Grafana, which is a well-known tool, okay? On top of Grafana, we built our dashboards, right? And then there's the Query Analytics application, which is developed by Percona, and is presented as part of Grafana as well. So you can check which are your most expensive queries and drill down and things like that. This is powered by ClickHouse. Okay, so there's, as you can see, a bunch of components working together within PMM. This is how the architecture looks like on a more detailed view. Okay, we have on the left side, there's your monitor systems, which again interact with the PMM client, which has the PMM agent, the different exporters that you're running. And this, there's the BM agent, which is the Victoria Metrics agent that pushes metrics to the server part, right? And then there's the components that I mentioned on the server side, and you as a user interacts with them, okay? So now let's briefly talk about how to deploy PMM. There's a few options. There's the Docker image, which is our recommendation, but there's also the possibility to use an OBA or provision it directly from the AWS Marketplace. There's a quick start guide that I recommend for anyone starting fresh. In terms of the Docker version, which is our recommendation, there's a way to install it with just a one-liner. If you do this command, you can get everything installed. This will install Docker if it's not already there in the server. Then pull the latest image that's available on our repository. And also there's the option to run this interactively. If you want to change any of the default settings, you can do so. For the client parts, there's a couple of steps. First, we have to enable the Percona software repository, where we will pull the client package from. Or you can simply download this directly and then install it via YAM or apt. Then you have to create a monitoring user inside MongoDB and give it the proper privileges for PMM to be able to gather the metrics, right? And finally, you connect the PMM client to the server. For configuring the Percona repository, for Red Hat, there's an RPM available, okay? So with just one line, you can get that done. And then for Ubuntu as well, we have our dev package, right? So there's more information in this link about this, but it's basically a one-liner, okay? In terms of the client installation, again, we first enable the repository that we need, which we can do with a command line interface to Percona release package. Then the second step is to install the actual package, and whether we are in Red Hat or a Debian-based Linux, you have the official package manager, right? And then, as I mentioned, we have to create the monitoring user. And here we require a custom role to be able to get all of the information that we need. So we can use the create role command, right? And we require the name. We can put any name really, but our default name is explain role. And it requires a few privileges to gather the information that you will see then in the dashboard. So you'll need all of these things, okay, to be able to see all of the info available. After you create the custom role, then you can assign this to the user. And in addition to this custom role, you will need a cluster monitor and read on the local database. Okay, this is all that's required. To connect the client to the server is pretty easy. PMM, as you know, listens over SSL on port 443. And then the client will upload the metrics to the server. So we have a command line to connect the client to the server that looks like this, okay? And by default, it will use self-signed certificates. If you want, you can override this, and that is why you see the insecure TLS option. There's more about this in the following link, in case you want to try your own certificates. So to register MongoDB, it will be a different command depending whether you're using standalone or ReplSet or a sharded cluster. If you're using a sharded cluster, basically the only difference is that you provide an additional cluster argument that helps PMM figure out which instances are actually part of the cluster. So the dashboards will not work properly if you don't specify this argument. So let's look at the UI components real quick. First, on the left side, there is the side menu, which has different tools available in PMM. Then on the top left, you have the navigation bar, which if you click on that, you will be able to select the different dashboards available. Then you have on the right side the view controls, which you can use to change the time range that you are looking at. And finally, there's the view selectors here that allow you to filter within all of the clusters or servers that you have. Oh, and I forgot, sorry, there was one more. Yeah, the shortcuts menu here. This menu is useful if you want to keep the time range that you have and the server selection, but you want to see a different dashboard, okay? It will carry on all of the selections that you made to the new dashboard. If you just click on the new dashboard from the menu here, you will lose the selection of time and so on. In terms of MongoDB dashboards, we have a few. We'll take a look at them, but these are the dashboards for starters, and then we have a few more to compare instances side by side. I'll show you this in a second. And then we have additional dashboards for each of the storage engines available in MongoDB. So let's first look at the cluster summary. And here, this is like the first dashboard you usually look at when dealing with a sharded cluster. So you have information about whether the cluster is balanced. For example, here you will see a red no if the balancer is disabled, and next to it you have whether the cluster has the chunks evenly balanced or not. And some additional information like the number of collections and the size of them, as well as the number of chunks, okay? So all of these will be like a high-level view of the cluster. Then for a replica set, the first dashboard that you should be looking at is the ReplSet summary, which has information about the members of the replica set, which one is the primary, which one is the secondary, whether there is replication lag, the current upload window, and one interesting thing you can see here is whether there was an election recently, and also whether your members are running the same version or no. So you can quickly check on that. Then the next dashboard, the instance summary. This is helpful to see information about a specific server. If you're debugging an issue, maybe you want to see a specific server in more detail, you'll have this info here. For example, how many operations per second you have in a server, how many queuing there is, connections, and so on. Then we have another dashboard that is the instances overview, which has the top 5 graphics in it. So if you want to check which instances are busiest within the cluster, this is a useful place to look at that. It will also display some of the same information that you saw on the previous one, but here you will see only the top 5, okay? This one I think is pretty useful, is the instances compare. This allows you to compare side by side the different instances. So you can compare the connection count, for example, the number of cursors and the latency of the operations, or things like that. And then you can like scroll down and see any of the metrics side by side, like on different hosts, and see what's the difference. Then this one is specific for the in-memory storage engine that, as you know, is one of the Percona server specific features. You have things like transactions, queued operations. Again, the same metrics that you know from the other dashboards will be present here, just dedicated to the in-memory engine. We still have a dashboard for mmap. If you're still on an older MongoDB version, you can see information about the document activity, the global lock, and things like that. Also the page faults. These are all metrics that were important back in the mmap days. So we're still tracking them here. And of course, we have the details about the WireTiger engine. So you can see the WireTiger cache statistics, for example, how many evictions there are, as well as how many transactions and whether there is queuing or not. usually when you see queuing, for example, it's an indication that there might be flow control going on, or there is the number of WireTiger tickets got exhausted. So it's one of the metrics that I look at most often, I guess, to see if the server is running fine or no. And you can see whether concurrency tickets go to 0, which is another common problem, very easily within this dashboard. Let's quickly talk about the query analytics. As I mentioned before, this helps you find which queries are the most expensive ones in your MongoDB. So you set a time range, then you can set some filtering by cluster name or replica set name, for example. And you can also define an order to see what is the criteria that you want to see first. And also, you can click on each individual query and see some examples, as well as the execution plan. I will show you this in a second. So this is what the query analytics looks like. Okay, on the left side, we have the filters that I was mentioning. So here, for example, I have clicked on the MongoDB cluster that I have. And as you can see, we have the number of queries over time. So if there's a specific query you're interested in, you can see when it happened. And then if you click on it, you will get some statistics in the bottom about the execution times and so on. As you can see, there are 3 tabs here. If we go to the next one, we'll see some examples of the query with the actual values that it had. And if you click on the other tab, Explain, you will see the actual execution plan as well as the statistics about the execution. So this is pulled from the profiler, okay? So to see this, you will need to have the profiler enabled. Okay, so now I'd like you briefly to talk about the new features that we have, specifically for MongoDB. One of them is the DB stats metrics. Okay, this is available in PMM version 226 and newer. So this basically is capturing all of this information within PMM. So you'll see the output of each of the database stats as well as each of the collections. You will see the index stats as well. And if you want to enable this, you will need to do so explicitly with the Enable All Collectors option, okay? In the PMM admin command, when you register the MongoDB for monitoring, you use this new option, and then that will give you all of these new metrics.
What's the overhead on the new metrics you have?
It depends on how many collections you have. And this is why I think I have that here. Never mind, it's further down. But yeah, it's limited to up to 200 collections by default. So if you have more than that, it starts to have a bit more overhead. You can enable that if you want, but we think it's safe up until a few hundred collections. Mm-hmm. So this is how the stats look like. As you can see, we have some new metrics available here in the Metrics Explorer. So you'll be able to see the size and the number of collections and indexes, as well as the compression ratio and things about the object size. The collection stats that you will be able to see include the number of documents per collection, as well as the storage size, and you can see the compressed size as well, so you can get an idea about the compression ratio. And this is what I was saying before, like we have limited this to 200 collections, okay? But you can, if you have a bit more and you want to try, it's safe usually up to 100 collections. It's just that some people have like thousands of collections, and in that case, it can get a bit expensive in terms of CPU usage for the exporter. And one other thing is that you can define filters for the data collection. So if you're interested in just the collection stats for a specific database, or just a few collections, you can use a regular expression to just capture info about that and not the rest of the collections you might have. regarding the indexes, as you know, having too many indexes is an issue because there's some overhead for the write operations. So in addition to the extra disk usage, so now we can track within PMM how many hits you have per index. Okay, so there'll be a new metric here that will track how much usage you're getting. What's important to remember about this is that the counters are reset whenever you restart MongoDB server. So if you just restarted recently, it might not really be that accurate. So usually you need to wait for some time to let this get an accurate value.
How did you get to that? Where did you go?
Oh, this is the Metrics Explorer. Yeah. So we are working on some new dashboards as well using these metrics. Right now we have the available raw metrics, so you can create your own dashboards as you want, but there will be, in the next PMM release, we'll be shipping some built-in dashboards as well that take advantage of these metrics.
Quick question.
Yes.
So I guess with the index tracking, the index usage tracking, you could probably consider getting rid of some indexes that way, right?
Right. If you see that an index is 0 hits over time, then of course it's a candidate for removal, right? Also, we have metrics about the top command in MongoDB. As you know, this command helps us get per collection statistics. So you can see how many operations of the different types you got applied on each collection. So how many queries, inserts, and so on. And then how much server time we spent on each of these operations. So this is very useful to see which collections are hottest and most actively used. More info about this is available in this blog post as well, if you want to check some more. Okay, so now let's briefly talk about integrated alerting. This is a feature that we have that is based on alert rule templates. We ship some templates for you, and then you can also create your own, okay? And the idea is that you'll get some expression that when it's evaluated to true, then it will trigger the alert, okay? So you can get notified about this currently via 3 methods, email, Slack, or PagerDuty. And one thing to keep in mind is this is still not a GA release, so you can use it and test it and contribute if you want, but keep in mind it might be changed between now and the final release.
Question, is that based on the Alert Manager, or is it based on the Grafana side, or?
Yeah, this is a built-in Alert Manager currently, but it might be changed between now and the release, so keep that in mind. So to enable this option, first, you have to go to the left menu, okay, and click on Settings. Then that will take you to this page, and you click on Advanced Settings, and then at the bottom will be the Integrated Alerting slider. You can apply this, and then set a a notification channel, okay, by going to the communications part, and then filling in the details about, for example, your email server. Once you have that, you can then select an alerts destination with a specific email address, okay? So you'll go to integrated alerting, and then within notification channels, you can fill all of the email information. To create an alert rule, we have to go to the new menu that will be available after you enable the integrated alerting. Then click on the integrated alerting option, and this will take you to the create page, okay? So here, for example, we are creating an alert for MongoDB down. You can put the text that you want and which notification channels you want to use for this particular alert. And then when you're done, you just hit save, and it will start taking effect. If you want to create a custom template, normally the way you do it is you go to the Metrics Explorer first, and figure out what's the expression that you want. For example, here, I'm looking at the app metric for service type MongoDB. And you can see this metric is 1 when the server is up, right? And then it goes to 0 when the server is down. So this expression can be used, for example, for an alert about the server, whether it's up or down. So this is how you get to the Metrics Explorer. You click on the option here, and then Explore, and then you have on the top side the place to put the metric expression. Oh, and on the top right you have the Run Query button to actually check if the expression that you selected is working as expected. So to create a custom template, we have to go again to the Alerting, Integrated Alerting option, and then we have an Add button on the right side. This will give you the place where you can paste the definition of the custom template. We have some examples available here, okay, to get you started. But the idea is that you will be using the expression that you developed in the Metrics Explorer and put it here. Then you can view which alerts are triggered at a specific point by going to this section, okay? And then you will see here I have a MongoDB down alert that is firing, and I can check, and on the right side I can silence, for example, the notifications. All right. If you want to know more about integrated alerting, these are some resources. There's the official documentation, and I have a few blog posts on the topic, so you might want to check those out. So, what are some of the reasons I think PMM is worth using? As we saw, we have thousands of metrics available. Like anything that you want to see is probably there with the latest improvements. It's very easy to check the data. Like Grafana is a well-known tool. Most people have used it at some point. It's also free and open source, so you don't really need to pay any sort of licenses to use it. And really, it's supported by all of the engineers at Percona, and we're constantly improving this tool. So, some of the things that are coming soon, new dashboards will be released in the next version using some of these new metrics that we incorporated for the DB stats, collection stats, and top. And then there will be some new dashboards for a summary of the environment as well that we are working on. There's a DB as a service functionality that you might have seen in the keynote that has to do with the operators, right? And the package management feature, you'll have, again, this console where you can schedule backups and even restores and see the inventory of your backups, define retention policies, and so on. So to get some more from MongoDB, you might want to consider the distribution of Percona. Some of the interesting things we have, in case you're not familiar with them, hot backup functionality for me is the most important feature, but you can also use integration with LDAP for authentication and authorization as well. We have the audit plugin and the in-memory engine for specific replicas if you want to have like real fast queries. This is a really cool feature. Also, Percona Backup for MongoDB is our solution for taking consistent backups. What's cool about this is that it supports sharded clusters, so all of the coordination that you need to be able to take a consistent backup in a sharded environment will be provided by this tool. And it also features point-in-time recovery. So you'll be able to quickly specify a specific time range, and then you'll get your data restored up to that point in time. You can store backups in any S3 compatible storage or NFS. And here's some more information about these tools to get you going with them. That is all I have, so thank you very much for attending. Any questions?
Do you know anybody running their PMM inside GKE?
Right now, there's no official support. I have a few experiments that I've seen. GKE, if somebody's running PMM within Kubernetes. Yeah, but for now, we don't officially support. I know it's in the plan to eventually support.
Can you conceive of any problems in doing it?
Well, I think what we need to do first is to provide some kind of failover solution, right? Because if in Kubernetes it gets rescheduled in a different pod, like, I mean, it could be problematic if like PMM is not prepared for like taking it down and starting it somewhere else. We'll need to think of a single entry point as well, like expose it via like a load balancer or something, right? I think eventually it's going to be there. But so far, only people have tried to play with it. But
That's just with the server, and if you could move the server outside of your cluster, right? And keep your and put your like client collecting data and then sending that. Would that get rid of that problem you just mentioned, perhaps?
sorry, I'm not following. What can you?
So move the server into a VM outside your Kubernetes cluster and just have the agents running in the pods.
Oh, right, yeah. That you can do, of course. And the client part can run as a sidecar container. That part is working. Okay, that's actually how the operator works. Like the Percona Kubernetes operator has PMM Client as a sidecar container. Yep. No problem. Any other questions? So that's all. Thank you very much.